Nobody at Havelock 7 ever asked my name either. That sounds like I'm drawing a comparison. I suppose I am. The station had 48 contract workers cycling through the outer pens on any given rotation. Cleaners, feed techs, maintenance haulers, and the administration kept us straight by badge number and shift code. Not cruelty exactly, just the way the math worked out when you were running a Frontier orbital on a skeleton budget with half the garrison on loan to the Careen corridor. We were line items, so were the units. I'd been working the Null-Class pen block for 11 months when they brought Voss in. He came in a freight container the size of a cargo loader, triple locked, with 4 governance handlers walking alongside, and none of them talking. I remember the sound before anything else, a low, sustained resonance, something between a groan and a frequency you feel in your back teeth rather than hear. Not aggression, more like a large machine that hasn't been switched off properly and is still cycling down. The handlers got the container to the pen, cycled the locks, and moved back fast. The hatch dropped. The first thing I saw was the plates. Null-Class units run big. That's the point. They're bred for presence as much as function. The sight of one is supposed to end most situations before anything else has to. Voss was big even for a Null-Class. Iron gray armor plating over the shoulders and along the spine, each plate the size of my torso, and ridged at the edges where they'd grown in overlapping. 4 legs, each one set wide, built for weight and traction rather than speed. A head that sat low on the neck, broad, with the amber sensor cluster eyes that the Null series used for close-quarters target acquisition. His breath in the cold pen air came out in a slow fog that drifted and settled. The handlers filed their paperwork and left. I stood outside the pen door with the feed cart and looked at Voss. Voss looked at the wall behind me, which was the Null-Class way of indicating they were aware of you without committing to a response. I said, "You want the paste first, or the block protein?" He looked at me then. Just shifted the sensor cluster about 3 degrees. That was all. I went with paste first. Set it inside the tray slot, stepped back. He ate. I didn't make a production of it. That was how it went for the first week. I didn't perform calm, I was just calm. There wasn't anything about Voss that frightened me particularly. I'd worked large predator units for most of my adult life, on 4 different stations, and the honest truth is that they're easier than people most of the time. They respond to consistency. They remember how you move. They don't hold grudges about things that happened 3 administrations ago, and they don't change the feed schedule without telling you. By the second week I was talking to him while I worked. Nothing important. What was wrong with the recycler on level 4? Whether the new batch of block protein was a different formulation, because it smelled different to me, and I wondered if it smelled different to him. He'd track the sound of my voice without turning his head. That slow sensor cluster shift, following me around the pen while I checked the water lines and the drainage. I started calling him Voss. The official roster had him as Unit Null 14, but that's not a name. That's an inventory number, and I'd never been able to make myself use inventory numbers when I was talking to something that could track my voice. I don't know if it mattered to him. I know he learned it. Somewhere around the 3rd week I said, "Morning, Voss," when I came in, and he was already oriented toward the door before it finished cycling open. That's not a trained response. That's recognition. The termination run was scheduled for the 42nd day of his rotation. I wasn't told officially. I found out the way contract workers always find out. Someone in the corridor mentions it to someone else, and the information moves faster than the paperwork. A transit block in the Havelock outer ring had gone dark. 3 governance liaisons unaccounted for. The kind of situation where you send a Null-Class unit and don't ask it to come back with anything that needs to go in front of a tribunal. That was the function. That was what the station kept Voss for. I did the morning feed same as always. I didn't say anything about it, because there was nothing useful I could say. I checked the water lines. I told him the recycler on level 4 was still producing a high-pitched hum at the 3-hour mark, and I'd put in another report. He tracked my voice. When I left, I didn't look back, because I didn't see any point in making it harder. The handlers came for him at the 10th hour. I was 2 pen blocks over, running a waterline flush on the smaller units, when I heard the corridor change. Sound travels strangely on an orbital. The plating carries it. What I heard was the specific silence that happens when a large number of people stop moving at the same time. I came out into the main corridor. Voss was walking toward me. Not running, Not in any kind of distress. Just walking, that steady 4-point gait with the iron plates shifting along his spine, fog breath drifting in the corridor air. Behind him, at a distance that told me everything I needed to know about how the termination run had concluded, were 4 governance handlers and the station's director of operations, a man named Carell, who I had spoken to exactly once in 11 months, when he'd informed me that my request for a second feed technician had been denied on budget grounds. Carell was using his command voice, the one that means he's already decided this is beneath him, but he's going to make you feel the full weight of his authority before he graciously solves it. Unit Null-14, return to escort formation. This is a direct operational command. Voss walked past him. He came down the corridor and stopped in front of me. Just stopped. Lowered his head about 12 inches, which put the top of his skull roughly at my chest height. The amber sensor cluster eyes oriented on my face. I put my hand on the top of his head, between the forward armor ridges where the plating is thinner and the skin underneath is warmer. He made that low resonance sound, not the cycling down frequency from the freight container. Something slower, steadier. Carell arrived behind him with the 4 handlers spread out in what I recognized as a standard Null-Class redirect formation, the kind you used when a unit had deviated from a run and you needed to reorient it without triggering a threat response. Handler Rennick. He made my name sound like a filing error. Step away from the unit. You are interfering with an active operational asset. I didn't step away. He's not in an active run anymore, I said. He walked back. I am aware of that. Carell's voice had taken on the specific texture of a man deciding whether to escalate. I am also aware that this unit completed only a partial engagement. There is a standing protocol for units that abort a designated run, and it requires immediate containment and evaluation. Step away. The handlers moved up. The formation tightened. Voss raised his head. It was a slow movement, deliberate, the way large things move when they want you to have time to consider what you're looking at. The amber eyes moved from me to the handler on the left, then to the handler on the right, then to Carell. He didn't snarl. He didn't vocalize. He just looked, and whatever the handlers saw in that sensor cluster gaze convinced 2 of them to take a step backward without being told to. Carell held his ground. I'll give him that. Unit Null-14 is station property under governance contract, he said, to me rather than to Voss, because he'd understood something about who he could actually negotiate with. The handler relationship does not supersede operational command authority. You do not have the standing to... I'm not claiming standing, I said. I'm just standing here. Voss lowered his head again and pressed the broad top of his skull back into my palm. The weight of it was substantial. I kept my hand where it was. What happened next is in the incident report, if you want the official version. The short version is that the 2 handlers who'd stepped back didn't step forward again, and the 2 who held the formation held it for approximately 30 seconds before Carell quietly indicated they should withdraw to a safe corridor distance. He stood there another minute on his own, with his command authority and his operational protocols and his governance contract language, looking at the back of Voss's armored head and at my hand resting between the plates. Then he left to file the report. I don't know what he put in it. I was never asked to sign anything. I know what I know. A Null-Class termination unit, built and conditioned to execute a function and remember nothing, to move through the world like a command with legs and leave no loyalties behind, walked away from its run, and came back down a corridor to the one place it had decided was worth returning to. I scratched behind the forward armor ridge, the way I'd learned he liked, and I said, "Morning, Voss." His sensor cluster oriented on my face. The low resonance came again, slow and steady, filling the corridor. He'd been built to forget. Turned out that part hadn't taken.